Hello and welcome to Weekly News Highlights. Let's begin with keywords that made headlines this week. South Korea and the United States have finally agreed on a trade deal, lowering the tariff rate on Korean exports from 25% to 15%. Seoul will also invest $350 billion in the United States and purchase $100 billion of energy products. Announcing that a deal has been reached, U.S. President Donald Trump said President Lee Jae-myung will visit the White House for a summit within the next 2 weeks. The North Korean leader's powerful sister says although the personal relationship between Kim Jong-un and Trump isn't bad, the regime is not willing to sit down for talks on denuclearization. South Korea and the United States have struck a full trade deal, lowering the reciprocal tariffs on South Korean exports to 15%. U.S. President Donald Trump met with key Korean officials in Washington to finalize the agreement, which includes hundreds of billions of dollars in South Korean investment. Our economic correspondent Park Jun-an has this report.
South Korea and the U.S. announced a major tariff agreement on Wednesday local time to lower reciprocal tariffs from 25% to 15%. The deal, however, required South Korea to commit to a $350 billion investment package. The $350 billion will be in the form of an investment vehicle and will be spent through equity investments, loans, and credit guarantees. An additional $100 billion will be spent on purchasing U.S. energy, mostly liquefied natural gas. The South Korean government said sector-specific tariffs involving semiconductors and pharmaceuticals are guaranteed most favored nation status, ensuring treatment as favorable as that afforded to other nations.
So we've made sure that if we face tariffs in the future on things like semiconductors or pharmaceuticals, we'll receive the same treatment as most favored nation level, ensuring we're not at a disadvantage compared to other countries' agreements.
Through the deal, tariffs on automobiles have also been reduced from the current 25% to 15%. Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Economy and Finance Koo Yoon-chul commented after the agreement that South Korea's shipbuilding project, which involves large-scale investments by South Korean private shipbuilders in the U.S., played a key role in the tariff negotiations.
The most noble part of today's agreement is the $150 billion South Korea-U.S. shipbuilding cooperation package, a project called Make American Shipbuilding Great Again.
This agreement will fund new U.S. shipyard construction, workforce training, supply chain rebuilding, and ship maintenance, leveraging South Korea's shipbuilding expertise. The remaining $200 billion will be spent to support strategic sectors that are closely related to the country's economic security. Those sectors include semiconductors, batteries, nuclear energy, biotechnology, and critical minerals. South Korea also pledged to purchase $100 billion worth of U.S. energy, primarily liquefied natural gas, over 4 years, redirecting existing import needs without any added economic burden. The last-minute tariffs agreement has reduced uncertainty for South Korean companies, which account for 19% of the country's global exports, ensuring they compete on equal or better terms than their rivals. Further details about the deal will be finalized in ongoing talks. Park Jun-an, Arirang News.
So was this a good deal? Officials say it's only the beginning. Also, the amount of investment and the rate of tariffs. How do they compare with South Korea's biggest trade competitor, Japan? And what specific efforts did South Korean officials make to close this deal? Our Kim Do-yeon has the details.
While a framework has been reached on tariffs, dealing with tariffs is far from over. Deputy Prime Minister for Finance Koo Yoon-chul told reporters that key details still need to be finalized, particularly regarding the $200 billion investment portion of the $350 billion package. As part of the deal, tariffs on most South Korean goods will increase from 0 to 15%.
A 15% tariff is undoubtedly challenging, especially for a country that has a free trade agreement with the US. But if our companies can leverage their creativity and competitiveness, this could turn into a new opportunity. While the broader agreement is done, we will continue to work out the specifics through further talks with the US.
Among the headline agreements is MASCA, a strategic shipbuilding initiative led by South Korea and backed by $150 billion in investment. This stands in contrast to the remaining $200 billion, which will be largely controlled by the U.S. The Korean government has emphasized this distinction, especially in light of comparisons with Japan's deal. Tokyo pledged a $550 billion investment, and when the deal was announced, President Trump claimed that 90% of the profit would go to the U.S. South Korean officials also underscore the size.
South Korea has a trade surplus of $66 billion with the U.S., while Japan's is around $68.5 billion. Yet our total investment fund is smaller. If we exclude the $150 billion led by our own companies, our actual contribution is $200 billion, just 36% the size of Japan's.
On the tariff side, the increase from 0 to 15% marks a significant shift. When it comes to cars, an industry with fierce competition, while Korean cars were tariff-free, their competitors, Japan and the EU, paid 2.5%. Now that advantage has disappeared, leveling the playing field in terms of price competitiveness. Agriculture and livestock market access, a contentious issue, was not included in the deal, despite strong pressure from the U.S. Officials revealed that during negotiations, they presented a photo from the 2008 mass protests in South Korea against U.S. beef imports, which drew over 10 million demonstrators, reminding U.S. officials it's a red line for them. On another side note, while President Trump did not meet with any other trade delegations, he made time to meet with South Korean officials. He later said this was a sign of his respect for South Korea. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
South Korean President Lee Jae-myung says the trade deal with the United States has eliminated export uncertainties. With this, a South Korea-U.S. summit is set to take place within 2 weeks. Our presidential office correspondent Yoon Jung-min reports.
Uncertainties in export conditions have been substantially eliminated, and South Korea has crossed a major hurdle. That was the assessment made by President Lee Jae-myung of the U.S. trade deal, as he noted the need to navigate an international trade order that's being reorganized.
국익 중심의 유연한 실용 외교를 통해서 급변하는 대외 환경의 파고를 슬기롭게 넘어가야 될 것입니다.
Presiding over a weekly meeting with his aides on Thursday, the president instructed the officials to fully prepare for follow-up measures, as well as long-term tasks such as expanding consumption at home and diversifying export markets. With a major diplomatic challenge somewhat removed, summit diplomacy between South Korea and the U.S. is expected to pick up speed, which has been stalled since President Lee Jae-myung took office in June. The first E-Trump summit is expected within 2 weeks.
I heard President Trump ask Secretary Rubio to set a date for next week, but considering schedules, it'll take place within 2 weeks.
Details of the summit, including the date, could be discussed when South Korea's Foreign Minister Cho Hyun meets his U.S. counterpart Marco Rubio in Washington on Thursday local time. The summit agenda is expected to include setting out details of the deal's framework. Security issues such as the allies' defense cost-sharing and purchasing U.S.-made weapons were not addressed this time, but could be brought up when the two leaders meet. Earlier in the day, South Korea's Defense Minister An Gyu-baek spoke over the phone with U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, where they agreed to modernize the alliance and expand cooperation in shipbuilding. All this as the South Korea leader says he expects Seoul and Washington to further strengthen their economic cooperation and alliance. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
The government unveiled its tax reform plan to address a substantial shortfall in tax revenue and support economic growth. Our finance correspondent Moon Ji-young explains more.
The 2025 tax reform bill introduces a mix of targeted tax credits for strategic industries and welfare, alongside adjustments to corporate and capital gains taxes.
Over the past 3 years, our tax revenue base has weakened rapidly, leading to a significant drop in the tax burden ratio. Therefore, this year's tax reform bill prioritizes reinforcing the weakened tax revenue base for fiscal sustainability, while also supporting economic strength and stabilizing people's livelihoods.
The reform package aims to enhance tax credits for R&D and investment in future strategic industries, including AI. Furthermore, to enhance K-content competitiveness, tax credits for webtoons will be newly introduced and tax support for video content creation will be expanded. Beyond these targeted incentives, the framework includes tax cuts designed to encourage corporate payouts and boost the stock market. Specifically, to encourage high dividends, a separate taxation system for dividend income from high dividend companies is being introduced. This approach excludes these dividends from the comprehensive financial income tax base, allowing earnings from stock dividends to be taxed independently rather than combined with other income. Despite the debate over tax cuts for the super-rich, a 35% tax rate is expected to be applied to the highest dividend income bracket. On the other hand, the bill aims to restore tax equity and rebuild the nation's revenue base based on the principle of ability to pay. The country's corporate tax rate will be raised by 1 percentage point across the board, with the top corporate rate increasing to 25%, effectively reversing a cut introduced by the previous administration. The bill also tightens capital gains tax rules by lowering the threshold for major shareholders. While currently only those holding 5 billion won or roughly $3.6 million in a single listed stock are taxed, that threshold will be reduced to 1 billion won or just under $720,000. Tax support will be expanded for low and middle income households with measures such as an increase in the income deduction limit for credit card use by up to 500,000 won or roughly $360 depending on the number of children for families. The tax burden on self-employed individuals and small business owners is also expected to be alleviated. The bill will first go through cabinet meetings before being submitted to the National Assembly for final approval. 문지영, Arirang News.
Samsung Electronics has clinched a landmark $16.5 billion deal to supply AI chips to Tesla, a move set to revitalize its struggling foundry division. In a regulatory filing, the South Korean chip giant announced on Monday that it has secured a 22.8 trillion won or $16.5 billion chip-making agreement. This represents more than 7% of Samsung Electronics' total revenue in 2024 and is the largest chip order for a single client secured by the company. The tech giant initially did not disclose who the client is or the specifics of the deal, but Tesla CEO Elon Musk said in a social media post later in the day that Samsung would produce next-generation A16 semiconductors for the company. The Korean firm currently produces A14s, while Taiwan's TSMC manufactures A15s. In a reply to a comment, Musk also suggested the deal could be much more than the amount Samsung had disclosed. North Korea broke its silence and issued back-to-back statements aimed at both South Korea and the United States this week. Seoul has been pondering whether to downsize joint military drills, while Washington maintained its stance that it is open to dialogue with Pyongyang. For more on this, we have our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung with us today. Bo-kyung, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
So Bo-kyung, let's delve a little bit deeper into what Kim Yo-jong said earlier this week.
Right, as Seoul tries to ease tensions on the Korean Peninsula and resume dialogue with Pyongyang, Kim Yo-jong released a statement on Monday and said President Lee is no different from his predecessor in blindly adhering to the ROK-US alliance. While saying that Seoul's recent suspension of anti-Pyongyang broadcasts is not something that deserves any appreciation, she also said that Pyongyang is not interested in any proposal put forward by Seoul. The Unification Ministry said this shows the high walls of distrust between the two Koreas, emphasizing that it will continue to pursue reconciliation with the North.
The government will stay steady and consistent in pursuing reconciliation, cooperation, and peaceful coexistence on the Korean Peninsula without overreacting to the North's responses.
The presidential office also issued a similar message, saying it will consistently take the necessary actions to make a peninsula without hostility and conflict. Regarding Kim Yo-jong's remarks, one expert said the regime is asking more from Seoul, especially regarding its alliance with the U.S.
The message points to a more fundamental issue, the nature of the South Korea-U.S. alliance. It suggests that the future of inter-Korean dialogue and the restoration of relations will depend on how much autonomy South Korea can exercise from the U.S. in managing its relationship with the North.
And the unification minister also talked about downsizing the drills between South Korea and the United States, right?
Right. Unification Minister Chung Dong-young said he will propose adjusting the scale of joint military drills to the president. South Korea and the U.S. conduct two major joint drills every year, the Freedom Shield in March and the Ilchi Freedom Shield in August. Both are command post exercises, war games in which military leadership executes wartime scenarios. They are accompanied by various field training exercises, with U.S. strategic assets also at times deployed to the peninsula. Reporters have been asking the Defense Ministry whether there might be any changes regarding the joint drill. Its response as of Thursday is that there have been no changes made yet to planned joint drills. But one expert points to a case where a drill was suspended in 2018, and there could be changes made even at the last minute if the Korean and the U.S. leaders agree to do so.
Back in 2018, South Korea and the U.S. suspended joint military drills amid improving inter-Korean and U.S.-North Korea relations. While changing the current exercise schedule may be difficult if both leaders agree, a decision to adjust or pause the drills could still be made to support broader peace efforts.
As far as I remember, Kim Yo-jong issued a statement to Washington next day. What was at the core of her message?
Yes, she urged the U.S. to approach North Korea based on new thinking and asked that Pyongyang be recognized as a nuclear weapons state. She did admit that personal ties between the leaders, Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, are not bad, but ruled out talks on Pyongyang's denuclearization. Still, the White House reaffirmed its readiness for dialogue with the regime's leader on that subject. The expert said Pyongyang is asking Washington to make a decisive shift for talks to resume, tossing the ball in Trump's court.
It is calling for new thinking and the search for an exit strategy to recognize North Korea as a nuclear-armed state and begin a new round of nuclear arms reduction talks based on that premise.
I see. And how is Pyongyang's relationship with Moscow going?
Well, their ties continue to strengthen, with Russia having launched the direct passenger flights between Moscow and Pyongyang for the first time in about 3 decades. And Pyongyang keeps providing arms to Moscow for its war in Ukraine. In fact, according to a report by South Korea's National Intelligence Service on Wednesday, support from Moscow and Pyongyang's troop dispatches have been cited as reasons behind Pyongyang's boosted confidence. The regime is considering itself to have a significantly more advantageous strategic position than before, which apparently led to Kim Yo-jong's back-to-back statements. Meanwhile, the relationship between Pyongyang and Beijing seems to have weakened a bit. North Korea's central news agency did show Kim Jong-un paying tribute at the Friendship Tower recently, symbolizing the ties between them on the occasion of the 72nd anniversary of the 1953 Armistice Agreement. The report on it was shorter than before, though, hinting at somewhat strained relations between the two.
All right, Po-kyung, thank you for the wrap-up today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Gyeongju, located in the southeast of the peninsula, is the host city for the upcoming APEC 2025 Korea. The city is known for its rich historical and cultural heritage. Our An Sung-jin was there to see how the past meets the present in the once capital of the ancient Silla Kingdom.
The APEC Economic Leaders Meeting has returned to South Korea for the first time in 20 years. And this time it's going to take place in Gyeongju. Gyeongju, where history breathes through the city, stood as the capital of the Silla Kingdom for 1,000 years. Renowned for its deep cultural roots, what kind of traces of historical legacy can we find today? These royal tombs are where the past rises from the earth itself. Daereungwon is a massive burial ground that covers more than 126,000 square meters and houses 23 tombs of Silla royalty. Visitors can even go inside Cheonmachong, or Heavenly Horse Tomb, and see the golden accessories found in the wooden burial chamber. Nearby these royal tombs that echo Silla's souls, Cheomseongdae Astronomical Observatory, one of the oldest observatories in Asia, shows the intellect and sophistication of the Silla people. And further afield, Bulguksa Temple is considered a masterpiece of Buddhist architecture. Home to national treasures including Tabutap and Seokgatap, the two pagodas, this World Heritage Site hints at the religious and artistic aspects of the ancient Silla capital. And those looking for a deeper understanding can visit the Gyeongju National Museum and have a peek at the Golden Crown from Kumgwoncheong Tomb. From ancient relics to cultural landmarks throughout the city, Gyeongju stands as a living monument for Korea's rich cultural heritage, an open-air museum where Silla's 1,000 years of history still breathes. An Sung-jin, Arirang News, Gyeongju.
75 years after the start of the Korean War, some of the men who helped defend South Korea have returned to the country they once fought for. Our Kim Jung-sil reports.
They were in their early 20s when they first arrived in Korea, young men in uniform sent to fight in a country they had never seen. 7 decades later, some of them have returned. 55 guests from 19 countries are taking part in South Korea's Revisit Korea, Review Korea program. Among them, 6 veterans of the Korean War, their families, and delegates from veterans associations. As part of the 6-day program, participants visited the War Memorial of Korea ahead of the official commemoration ceremony on Sunday.
And came here in 1952. Actually, my experience in the war was as a tank driver. We had to defend that place because otherwise the Chinese communists would overrun and come back to Seoul. So that was our job.
Now 91, Yamashiroya was joined by his grandson, who reflected on his grandfather's influence on their family.
He's a really strong and tough person, mentally, and he's really ingrained that in our family and everything he's done. So yeah, it's definitely an honor learning more about the culture of Korea, the history behind the war, hearing about their impact. It means a lot.
I'm so happy for the Korean people because they persevered and make a success out of themselves.
While some veterans were able to return, others could not. Sunday ceremony was held for UN Forces Participation Day, South Korea's official day to honor foreign veterans of the Korean War. U.S. Army Corporal Fred B. McGee was recognized with the country's highest military honor. His daughter accepted the medal on his behalf.
What you've done here this past week has been highly commendable. It's above and beyond anything that I expected. I just celebrate the Korean government and the Korean people for all they've done for the Korean War veterans.
The medal was presented by Prime Minister Kim Min-seok, who also addressed the ceremony.
To protect the freedom and peace of the Republic of Korea, 1.98 million UN troops stood alongside the Korean people. Their sacrifice will never be forgotten.
For the veterans and families who visited this time, the trip offered not only commemoration, but connection. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
Seoul's iconic Light Festival, which has dazzled fall and winter nights for years, is lighting up summer for the very first time. Our Park Hyo-bin takes us there.
As night falls in summer, the carving aluminum surface of Dongdaemun Design Plaza bursts into color, shimmering with wave after wave of vivid digital light.
This is the first time media art is being showcased here at Dongdaemun Design Plaza during summer. Amid the tropical night, this is the perfect place to cool off and enjoy art.
The first summer edition of Seoul Light DDP expands beyond the iconic structure, turning the surrounding park and the historic Seoul City Wall, a defensive wall built during the Joseon Dynasty, into a stage for immersive storytelling. Cascading visuals resembling waterfalls flow over ancient stone, while nearly 200 drop-shaped LED sculptures change color, creating a vibrant rhythm with the night. The central theme, Textures of Light, unfolds across multiple zones. Visitors are invited to walk along the city's fortress wall and encounter projections, laser shows, and kinetic installations along the way.
It's a lot of fun. I like the music. It's loud. It's exciting.
Artists from around the world also joined the summer edition of Seoul Light DDP. Through pulsing light and sound, a Polish art team transforms invisible algorithms into an experience that feels like a peek into the future.
The installation you see behind me, it's called Flux. It's done by our studio that is called Sawery Komputery. We're from Poland, and we're grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting us to Korea. It's always a nice time to be here.
One of the standout moments from the opening ceremony is a hanbok fashion show, where traditional Korean garments are reimagined through light. The fashion show blends tradition with innovation as models and contemporary hanbok walk through radiant displays of media art. Since 2019, Seoul Light DDP has attracted over 1 million visitors annually and earned global acclaim, most recently sweeping the top 3 international design awards. The summer edition runs nightly from 8 to 10 p.m. through August 10th. As the city swelters, this luminous escape offers a breath of visual cool. Park Hoo-bin, Arirang News.
That is all we have for this edition of Weekly News Highlights. Thank you for watching and enjoy the rest of your weekend.